these skills that we're talking about, they're not learned the way we traditionally teach things. When you were learning the periodic table, your teacher said, here are the elements, and this is a proton, this is a neutron, remember it. And you'd remember it and you'd write it down on the test. That's not how we learn leadership, networking, negotiating, or all these other skills. There is no formula. There's not simple stuff to memorize. It's more akin to learning a sport or learning how to play an instrument. You have to try it. You have to practice. You have to get feedback and reflection. And so the best way to learn these skills is through peer learning groups. And this program that I give away for free is something your organization can do to use it.
Hi, and welcome to the Sunday Lunch Project Manager podcast for Sunday, the 23rd of October 2022. This is your host, Nigel Creaser, and this week we have the second part of my chat with Mark Herschberg, the Career Toolkit Guy. Enjoy.
We don't have to get all the value from our career itself. So for example, I knew a guy who originally wanted to be a research scientist, and he figured out he wasn't great at the science. He might be able to get into some bottom tier PhD program and maybe get a job eventually in some lab, but wasn't going to be a great job. Now, it turned out he loved sales, which also you won't do much of as a research scientist. So he got into sales and he realized as a salesman, he could make a lot of money. And by making a lot more money than he could as a research scientist, he could take some of his earnings as a salesperson and sponsor a much better research scientist. His words, not mine. Yeah. And so one of the things he wanted to do was contribute to the world and science, but his best path for doing that wasn't being the guy in the lab. It was being the guy selling a lot so he could sponsor the guy in the lab. So we can find ways to create that value we want. It doesn't have to be directly from our job.
Yeah, that's true. Never thought of it like that. So if someone's coming to look at your app, right? Your book, you mentioned the app to me earlier, that you've got a kind of a complementary app to the book. You want to talk about that a little bit and just kind of, because I'm really intrigued. You got my juices going on that when you mentioned it. I thought this sounds interesting.
So I created two apps, and the first is the Career Toolkit app. Now, one of the things that happens when you read a book like mine, like yours, other business or even self-help books, you say, okay, there's great advice in here. And then you forget it 2 weeks later because we move on. And unless you're reading that book to study for your PMP exam or something specific, it quickly fades away. Well, that's not useful. That's not why we read books. So I thought a lot about how can we help you retain what you read? And I have a background not just as an author, but also an engineer, as an educator. I've worked in media. And I started thinking through all this and came up with the Career Toolkit app. So it takes the key points out of the book and it puts them into an app, and you can use it one of two ways. Either you're saying, oh, I am walking into a networking event, and boy, there were all these great tips in the book that I forgot because I read 6 months ago. I wish I could look at them right now, right before I walk in the room. Well, you've got the app in your pocket. So you pull it out, you jump into those networking tips, you flip through them, you get that quick refresh, and now you hit the room with that top of mind. The other way is you might say, I am a new project manager, or I'm a project manager, but I've just learned all these new techniques in this great book. I don't want to forget them. Now, you're not going to go back and read the book. Maybe you took notes. You're probably not going back and looking at. So the app has a passive learning mode where each day at a time you set, it's going to give you a push notification. We don't annoy you with those throughout the day. It's you pick what you want when you want it. You get that little pop-up, let's say at 9 a.m. right as you walk into the office. Go, all right, yeah, that was a good tip. Swipe it away. And each day it takes 2-3 seconds, but it helps keep it top of mind. So the time you invested in reading the book is now you're getting that better ROI because you're going to remember it. So that's the Career Toolkit app. we created a second one, Brain Bump. And with Brain Bump, it's the same idea, but it's like a Kindle version. We have content not just from my book, but other books, blogs, podcasts, talks, classes. So it's all this other content, and it's the same thing. You get the highlights, and you can save them to your favorites. You can look at them each day. You can look at them just in time. You can share them on social media. So it gives you access to the content you want when and where you want it.
Oh, wow. It's really cool. Because that's something that I think that embedding learning in organizations is hard. Whether it be formal learning from a book, whether it be a training course, whether it be a conference, whether it be a procedure and processes as well. And I think and a massive one that I find is difficult is project management lessons learned. And it just kind of that straight away when you talk about that, it kind of sits there and makes me think, it kind of feels like it's pulling out the salient points. Does it automatically aggregate that sort of stuff, or is it something that is pre-chosen by you or others?
We have content curation, and just like Netflix, we're adding new content all the time. Nothing goes away. We're just adding to it. Yeah. And then you can pick, because as we get up to having hundreds of books, which I hope to have later this year, hundreds of books and blogs and podcasts, you don't want all of them. That's going to be too much. And you can focus on a particular type of topic. Maybe it's a book you're reading. Maybe it's a great podcast like this one you're listening to and you want to retain more of it. Or maybe there's a certain topic, and so you get a few books or blogs or whatever on the topic and really concentrate on it. You choose what you want and when you want it. And by the way, you mentioned organizational learning. I have another tool for that. So on the website, on the resources page, I have a number of free downloads. And these are tools I give away. I don't even capture your email because I don't want to give you any reason not to download this. I'm not trying to sell you anything. The Career Toolkit Development Program is the first download on the resources page. This is a learning program for your company. Here's how it works. These skills that we're talking about, they're not learned the way we traditionally teach things. When you were learning the periodic table, your teacher said, here are the elements, and this is a proton, this is a neutron, remember it. And you'd remember it and you'd write it down on the test. That's not how we learn leadership, networking, negotiating, or all these other skills. There is no formula. There's not simple stuff to memorize. It's more akin to learning a sport or learning how to play an instrument. You have to try it. You have to practice. You have to get feedback and reflection. And so the best way to learn these skills is through peer learning groups. And this program I give away for free is something your organization can do to use it. In short, I recommend creating peer learning groups, typically about 6 to 8 people in size, but you can scale it up if you want to go bigger. And then you take some content. Now, it could be, if you use my book, I have a companion that says how to use my book for it. You take a couple pages, you read this, and then you come together to discuss it. And you share what you got out of that as you think about leadership. And I'll share what I got out of it. And we give different stories and different lessons. And I'll say, hey, I have a leadership challenge. Here's what I'm thinking. And you say, well, I was in a similar situation. Here's what worked. Here's what didn't. This is how we learn from each other. Now, you can use my book if you want. If you don't want to use my book, use another book. They can use your books. They can use other books on leadership or any of these other topics. They can use blogs. They can use a podcast like this one. The point is, you get some content and you have that discussion, because it's in that discussion. That's like your scrimmage. That's where you're practicing these skills, because we can't go into the office and say, hey, everyone, I'm going to try leading in a new way for the next afternoon. And oh boy, screwed that up. Do over, timeout, doesn't count. Not how it works. So these groups give us that chance to scrimmage, to practice, to learn. And that's how we're going to develop these skills.
That's really interesting, because that kind of works. I've seen the similar concept where you get book clubs as an example, just kind of business book clubs where they will everyone will read a book and then they'll talk about it and kind of get the idea on there. I think there's PMI run one in the UK, and you're right, because you can. The thing about reading a book, especially in quotes technical book, you miss bits, don't you? You don't get bits, or there are bits that the context that it's delivered in, you may not click with it. But sitting with 6 other people talking about it, and they say, oh yeah, I read this bit and it really resonated with me because I had this situation here, and this is what and if I'd known that, I could have used it. And I can see how those sort of conversations, those sort of mentor groups, aren't they? The mastermind groups that some people call them, don't they? How that can really help. And structuring that is a really good way of doing it, isn't it? Having that structure around something rather than trying to do it informally. Because yeah, I can see
exactly right. If you think, for example, about project management skills, I know that's something the audience has. And if they got nothing else and they heard, I should think about applying my project management skills to my career, go, brilliant. It's not a lot of extra work. You're just looking at the skills you have. Now, it could be something you just learned in the book, or in this case, skills you've had already, and say, here's a whole new way I can apply them to unlock more value. And that's the type of thing that you can get. It doesn't have to come from an expert like myself. It can come from a peer. It can come from someone's different perspective. So don't just say, oh, I only can listen to experts. I can only listen to people with certain titles. You can learn from each other. That's the secret. And so this program helps you do that.
Yeah. And I think that practical application, isn't it? It's got kind of a lot of the training you do, a lot of the books you read, being able to apply them is really hard. The only area where you get to really practice, I've found, is when you've got presentation training, which is really good because you get into that situation. And or on some of the training I've done some brilliant training where they and negotiating was one of the things. Actually, they gamified it in some cases, and that's really good as well, because by gamifying it, you don't recognize that you're doing it and failing at it or succeeding at it. But then if you've got a really good facilitator, who in this instance, the guy's incredibly good, they're able to bring that out at the end and point out, well, when you did that, you were doing this part of it. But I also think the role-playing kind of work sometimes is fantastic. And in those groups, you could potentially have those role-playing activities. Someone can pay, and you need to have a bit of structure on it. But I remember we were going in there, and you'd go in as a group, you pick as a project manager, you're going in to pitch to or meet with the new CIO and his boss. And this is what you're going to meet. You go in there, and actually what you've briefed for, because this other person's in there you weren't expecting, the meeting changes, and you can't practice that. You don't know when that's going to happen. But if you role play it, you do get that practice, and you can really make you think, actually, I know that. I went to say this course I've got, a massive zip file. It's a week-long course. It's one of the best courses I've ever been on, and there's a lot of content in there, a lot of learning, and I know I learned a lot there. And some of it I went back over, and we had a group of us who was kind of alumni conversations, but that drifted over time as people left the organization. But it was really, really difficult. It's difficult to consciously keep that training going. And as you say, with reading a book, keeping that knowledge in the book going and keeping it popping up in your head. I can see how some of this tooling you're talking about can help with that, especially. I think it's about embedding it, isn't it? Because once it's embedded, sometimes it's time recording is a great one. We all go on time recording courses. We've got time management courses. I've been on more than one. The skills are very similar in most of the courses, but I've let them drift because I've forgotten about them over time, or something else got in the way. But you need to embed these things several times. And once they're embedded, they become habit, don't they? And once they're habit, you don't have to think about them, but getting them to be habit is the hard thing.
Think about playing football. Now, the game that your team is going to play this weekend, they've never played that exact game before. But what they did do is they ran a bunch of drills. They ran passing drills and scoring drills. And by having the drills, by building the muscle memory, they're ready for when that meeting with the CIO suddenly has someone else in there go, well, I haven't done this, but I've done this type of drill and that type of drill, and I can figure it out on the fly. Now, just like your favorite football team, they don't recruit someone and say, hey, you look great. We're bringing you onto the team. We're going to send you to a 2-day football clinic. And okay, you did it. Great, done. Now just go and play matches. You don't need more training. We hired you. We hired you because you're a good football player. And yet that's what we do with our team. Well, we hired you. We sent you 2 days of training. What more do you need? You don't need to practice this. You just need to do the work. And so this is what helps us by doing this type of thing, say an hour every other week or once a month. You're getting that training just like your football team does, just like others do. And you're keeping it top of mind. You're building that muscle memory, and you're going to be so much more effective. Now, your favorite football team, the amount of time they spend practicing versus playing is significant, right? At least 10 times as much practice as playing, probably even more. You might not have that ratio, but right now your ratio is probably 0 to 40 hours a week. And if we can just change that to even half an hour to 39 and a half hours, already that is a huge improvement. That's how we want to think of it. And by the way, if your company doesn't want to do this, and the way the program is written, you can give it to HR and say, here, it's all written out for you. In fact, you can cross my name out. I put this in the copyright. Cross my name out, put your name there and say, I had this brilliant idea. Take it, use it. But if for whatever reason your company doesn't want to do that, do it yourself. Go get friends, go get peers, go create a local meetup group, go find other people who listen to this show and say, hey, I want to create this group. Who's in with me? And do it yourself. You don't all have to be in the same organization.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And that kind of hopefully, actually, one of the things I created about a month ago for the podcast is a listener group with that kind of, not quite as well thought out as you, but kind of the idea of being able to bring together the speakers and the interviewees on here to be able to come in there, and for the listeners to have those conversations and continue this, ask more questions about this kind of topic, about this interview and all of the other interviews, and then hopefully bounce off each other and get that same sort of thing. So again, that's kind of, it's kind of yeah, I'm going to pretend that I thought it out as well as you did for that. It's because that
you can take the program, put your name on it, and you did.
Yeah, that's it. And it's we could maybe introduce some of that into that with the people on there and have that conversation and use that kind of style with it. So yeah, I'll take a look at that myself. That'll be really interesting. I think it's again. Most organizations, it's kind of you, and most people kind of think, oh, you've got this training to do, and you do have these I've seen more bite-sized training coming through, but quite often it's around the mandatory training to get that tick off, to make sure that we know that we're cascading to the organization. This is the diversity, this is your ethics, this is your climate change stuff, and making sure bang, 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 you're on message and we all understand what the organization's view is, and upskills us as well. But then outside of that is that skill base, that extra skills, whether it be our project management, whether it be our baseline skills, as we're talking about, the fundamentals. If those tend to be those ones where they go, right, when's the day or when's the week you're going to go on that course? When are you going to go on that training program? But as you say, if you go on that training program, we don't have that conversation with I don't have the conversation with my team, I'm with my manager about, right, if you're going to go on that course, Nige, how are you going to make sure you embed that into your day-to-day job after you've been on that course? And the conversation should be, right, so maybe we do 2 of those bigger sets of training and go, right, 2 a year, right, that one you go in there, that one you go in there. And then for the next 6 to 8 weeks, there's half an hour where you're reaffirming that into your job, reaffirming it into what you're doing each week in the same way, and whether it's with those groups. And I think some of the sort of leader group where they have longer term training programs where you'll have the sort of fast track leadership things or leaders, future leader type things, those tend to do it, but we don't tend to do it just, in quotes, run of the mill training. And maybe that's the approach to try and actually drive. So it's embedding the training, isn't it?
That's right. We focus on a small set of privileged few, and we shouldn't, because it's most of us doing the work, and most of us aren't in that privileged few. And the great thing about this program, because when you think about it, we say, oh, I'm going to take the top 10% of people and send them off to this training program that costs £3,000. Okay, it's expensive. You might not be able to send everyone at £3,000 for a full week where they're not doing work and they're learning. But with this program, there is no cost. At most, maybe you buy my book and use it, or a different book. But again, you can use a free podcast like this or other content. There is no cost, so you can scale it up to your whole organization. And when you do so, you get a number of benefits. First and foremost, you're upskilling your team. Fantastic. More skills, moving that short side, making it slightly longer. We know that's going to be huge. Second, you are engaging your employees. Right now, we still are seeing effects from the Great Resignation. We're still seeing people looking around saying it's not just about the money. And if the company says, well, we're upskilling you, we believe in you, we're training you, people will stay. People will want to join. Third, you're increasing your internal network. Because when you do these, you don't just say we're putting all the salespeople in one group and all the engineers in one group. You want to create that diversity. You want classic diversity. You want men and women and different ages and backgrounds, but you want diversity in terms of skill set, of functional area. And that's going to help increase the internal networks, which really benefit the company overall. And finally, you are creating a common language. If, for example, the book you use is Good to Great, well, they talk about the Hedgehog Model. And if everyone's gone through that, then you and I can be talking about something and say, well, let's think about what the hedgehog would do with this. And go, oh, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. So you get these four benefits. You get upskilling, you get engagement, you get internal networks, and you get communication. And it is all completely free.
Yeah, I can see no downside to it.
So absolutely do it. And if your company won't do it yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, isn't it? Is you can choose to do that, and you can choose to do it on any topic that you want to do, kind of. So I think, see, we're coming up on an hour now, and just going back to the book, if there was one section of the book that you would say is the most important one for someone, if they couldn't find the time or the energy to look at the rest, which one would you say to someone? Read that one, do what that say, and just give us a little précis of what it is in.
I don't think I can pick any one, but and certainly it was designed that you don't have to go in order. You can say, what is it I want? It's almost like saying, I'm giving you a toolkit, pick one tool. You want the hammer, you want the screwdriver, what's most important? Like, well, what am I trying to do?
Yeah.
And that's going to determine the tool. If you're really not sure, so you might know and say, this is an area I want to focus on. If you're just saying, wow, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to begin, chapter 1 is a good place. Chapter 1, career planning, because it's going to walk you through. There are questions to help you think about where do you want to go if you're not sure, and then how to create that plan. And the plan is not just, I have this title, then that title, the next title. It's, I need to get better at this skill than that skill. And how am I going to do that? Will it be a job? Will it be training? So that's going to help you create a plan if you're really not sure where to begin.
Fantastic. So if people want to, well, actually, before I go into that, was there anything that you had in your mind that you wanted to cover today?
I think we got it all. We talked about the book. We talked about the apps. We talked about the free training program. The apps, by the way, are free as well. There's the free resources. So a whole bunch of great things completely free for you to use.
Fantastic. So if people want to find out about that, then where do they need to go?
You can go to my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com. There you can see where to buy the book, Amazon, and other places. You can get in touch with me if you have questions, if you want to bring me into your company. There are ways to follow me on social media. There are new articles every week, so I put out additional content. There is the app page where you can download the Career Toolkit app free from the Android and iPhone stores. And then the resources page with a bunch of free resources, including the Career Toolkit Development Program and other free online resources. All of that is at thecareertoolkitbook.com. Then the Brain Bump app is under Cognosco Media, COGNOSCO media.com. If you go there and click over to Brain Bump, you'll see where to download the apps. Also for free on the Android and iPhone store. At the time we're recording this, there's something going on with Apple where if you type in Brain Bump, it does not come up in the search. It does on Android. So if you go to cognoscomedia.com and Brain Bump at the bottom, you can click, you can snap the QR code, so you can search for it on the website and then snap the QR code on your phone. And both those apps are free as well.
Fantastic. Brilliant. And and if people want to actually get in touch with you, just ping you through the website or LinkedIn or anything like that?
Either of those two websites or LinkedIn. I make it very easy, and message me whatever is convenient for you. I'm less active on social media. I'd say LinkedIn or the websites than some of the other options, but eventually we'll see even on the other channels.
Yeah, I'm a bit like that with things like Twitter. I'll occasionally dip into Twitter and go, oh, I've got certain comments in here I need to respond to. It's just, it doesn't float my boat, that one, for some reason. That's brilliant. Well, all I can say is thank you very much, Mark, for the conversation. It's some really interesting and fascinating direction that you're talking there about how we can think about our careers. And I know as project managers, sometimes you're thinking about the next project rather than your career because you've got that finite window. So taking us out of that bubble and making us think, actually, where's this project management career taking me? It's a fantastic way of thinking about it, and getting some of those other skills as well is really useful. So have a fantastic rest of your day. And thank you very much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Well, I'm sure you enjoyed that second part of the interview with Mark Herschberg there. Some great career advice and some really good tools that a lot of them are free as well. It's fantastic. So get on that and hope it can help elevate your career. Next week, we have got a monstrous episode just in time for Halloween. I've got Andrew Bull on here talking about monsters of team performance in his new book, Monsters of Team Performance. So make sure you've clicked and subscribed and all that, ready for next week. I'll speak to you then. Cheers then. Bye. Wow, you made it this far. I'm guessing that you enjoyed the show if you have, or maybe you've just left it playing in the background and forgot it was on. But if you did enjoy it and you're inclined to, I'd be delighted if you could share the show with your colleagues. Discoverability with podcasts is quite difficult, especially with a niche one like this. But sharing with your colleagues and letting them have a chance to listen to these fantastic guests would be brilliant. If you've got time, a review on whatever platform you listen to it on would be great too, especially if it's a 5-star one. Again, that makes it easier for people to discover the show when they're searching on there, because the comments raise it up the old search engine optimization on all the different tools. If you are feeling flush, I have a couple of ways you could contribute. One is Patreon, Patreon/Sunday Lunch PM, and you can donate some money to the podcast that way, or you can jump along to my website, nigelcreaser.com, www.nigelcreaser.com, and click on the link to the shop, and in there you've got all my books that I've created in the varying different guises, a number of different ways you can grab a copy of those. And down the bottom I've got the my guests' books, so everyone who's been on here, if they've had a book, I've got a link to their book in there, and Amazon give me a little bit back for when someone buys from them. But more importantly, if you come back next time and listen, I'll be delighted. So I'll leave you alone and let you get on with your day now. Thank you. Bye. Well, it's goodbye from me, Nigel Creaser, and it's goodbye from him, the Sunday Lunch PM. Goodbye.